So this is a more cap and barrel, and I have a few other more caps and barrels, and I don't have more nibs to go in them, but I do have Schaefer nibs, but no Schaefer pens. So here's a question for you. Schaefer nib in a more barrel. Should I go to hell for doing that, or should I go to heaven for putting a pen together that you and you and you and you and you can use for the rest of your life? And I'm not harming the nib, nor am I harming the cap and barrel in the production of this pen. So a more collector could get this pen eventually and put it in their collection. If they yank out this nib and put in a more nib, or conversely, a Schaefer collector who needs a nib can pull this out and put it in their Schaefer pen. But in between those times, between now and that time in the future, this pen can create beautiful artwork, write beautiful poetry, add up columns of numbers, write a grocery list, plot the overthrowing of the government, do whatever people use pens for. It can be used for that purpose. So let's pretend I do that. Hey, what do you know? I just did. I found a couple of more barrels and caps and shoved Schaefer nibs into them. When I say shove, I don't mean shove. I made them fit. They were, I didn't harm the nib by putting them in the pen. You can do that. I didn't do it, but one can if one puts them in the wrong way. But I think, this is a perfectly good solution for two unused pen parts. Or if you add up all of the parts, you've got a cap and a lever and a section and a feed and a nib. You had 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 pen parts, which are now put together and functioning. So let's say I do this. Now what should I charge for this pen? I probably would pretend that it might be original and then deduct an amount for the wrong nib, let's say. Let's say this pen was worth, let's just pick a number. Let's say it was worth $100 if it had a more nib in it. Okay, it doesn't have a more nib, but it has a Schaefer nib. So does that make it worth $90? Let's do it the other way around. Let's say I have this belongs in a Schaefer Craftsman pen, and let's just pretend that the Craftsman is worth $50. Some people might say that this part is rarer than the Schaefer Craftsman part, and therefore maybe this should be worth $60. I don't know. I'm probably not gonna think that hard about it. Many of the pens that I sell, especially those that have maybe a little bit of trauma to them, like here's a Skyline pen. Somewhere down the line, the cap area right up here has shrunk. I don't know how that happened, but the cap has a certain amount of damage to it. The barrel seems to be pretty clean, but let's pretend it has tooth marks to it. So essentially what I'm doing, I'm selling a working pen, a working nib in a holder. I'm not really charging so much for this part of the pen on a pen that has some damage to it or some wear to it. I'm charging for the nib in a holder. I probably would do the same thing for Frankenpens of this type. Now, if this were a yellow dual fold ladies pen, that the mathematics would be a little bit different, because the yellow ladies Mandarin yellow pen is worth a lot of money, even if it didn't have a nib. But most of the pens that I'm doing this to are number 2 sized pens that are rather plain looking. They might be, quote, ladies pens that are missing the ring, or a pen like this that's fine but very faded. So that's my plan anyway. Rather than just having this pen sit in a drawer unused and this nib sit in a different drawer unused, I'm putting them together and making them usable. And this nib, this pen, even if it's wrong, this nib writes, and this pen writes better than almost anything you can buy brand new today for $500. I'm just telling you. So I'd rather have the pen being used than being sit in a drawer. And I've got hundreds of nibs and hundreds of barrels. Some of them match. Many of them don't. I also have, there are pens like, for example, I'll just yank one out here. See if I can find one. Let's say this pen. This is an Eberhard Faber. Oh, it actually is a gold nib. I may have already done this to this pen. Often you can find pens that are functional, off-brand pens that have steel nibs. And sometimes you can take the nib and the feed out and put a new feed and a gold nib in the pen, and you have a really nice, perfectly good pen that's way better than the original one would have been brand new. If you could get a time machine and go back to 1936 and buy this pen, or whenever this pen was made, brand new, this Frankenpen that I've made works better than the one that was sold originally. So I think I'm doing a good deed. What are your thoughts? Here's that nib that went into this more, or that could go into that more. You know, I happen to have a barrel and a cap that can fit, but I do have one of these that I just was trying to work at yesterday, and I realized there's a crack on the threads. Oh, where did I put that? It's right here. See if this, I tried some shellac here to hold it in place, and it seems to be work. It doesn't seem to be jiggly. So in that case, I did fix it to be usable. So good for me. But let's say I was unable to fix this. This nib can be put somewhere else or melted down, but that would be a crime against humanity. So putting this in a Moore barrel is another option. This nib, though, still seems, I want this to go in further. That's what I want it to do, but it doesn't want to do that. I'm still having issues with this nib. See it? It's very tight, except it's loose. So I shove this all the way in, and then I put this in it, and this it's very tight. Anyway, we'll leave it the way it is. It might be a little wet. Sometimes it's nice having a nib that's a little wet. I'll try this out. I'll fill it up and try it out for a day or two, see how it works for me. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts about the Frankenpenning? A lot of people think it's just an absolute abomination. Do you think it's an absolute abomination, or do you think it's justifiable? A friend of mine in the building had I think it was a Mercedes-Benz, and I think he bought it secondhand, and it was, had been in an accident or something, and he found a driver's door, and a new hood over the engine, and so he had them replace the ones that were bent or broken or something. And the hood was a different color than the body of the car, and the door was a different color than the hood and the body. So there was a three-toned car, and it looked like a Mondrian painting. And it just made me smile when I saw that. See, it doesn't want to go further than that. It hits that thing right there. There's a little burr. That's why it's not going in. A little chunk of shit. Right at the top there. That's why this was not going in further. There. Now it'll go in. I don't know how that thing got there, that little burr. There. Better. Betterer. Bye.